During the day, the armed forces of Ukraine carried out attacks on 23 artillery units of the Russians in combat positions, as well as 2 electronic warfare and 2 communications centers of the invaders. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 1800 on the 22nd of June. Details: in addition, a command point, 2 clusters of Russian personnel and military equipment, 2 ammunition storage depots and 1 fuel and lubricant depot were hit. In the last 24 hours, the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine inflicted 7 strikes on clusters of Russian personnel and 4 attacks on their anti-aircraft missile systems. The Russian invaders continue to focus their main efforts on the Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts, and heavy battles continue. During the day, over 20 combat clashes were recorded. On the Volyn and Polishcha fronts, the operational situation is without significant changes. On the Severshchina and Slobozhenshchina fronts, the Russians inflicted airstrikes in the areas of Ohertsev and Platonivka in Kharkiv Oblast. They carried out mortar and artillery attacks on the settlements of Novovasilivka, Stepny, Vorozhba, Kindrativka, Andriivka, Pysarivka, Novosich and Slavhorod in Sumy Oblast, as well as Udi, Veterinar, Haranov, Kazaka Lopan, Platonivka, Taik, Varvarivka, Budarki, Chuhunivka and Ambarn in Kharkiv Oblast. On the Kupiansk front, the Russian units carried out unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of Sinkivka and inflicted an airstrike in the area of Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast. Odradna, Kolodyazne, Krasny Persh, Fyholivka, Novomlinsk, Vorokna, Zapadna, Mashutivka, Kyslivka and Berestov in Kharkiv Oblast were subjected to artillery and mortar attacks. On the Lyman front, the Russian invaders launched airstrikes in the areas of Nevsky in Luhansk Oblast and Ivanivka, Torsky, Bilohorivka, Dubrova and Spern in Donetsk Oblast. Nevsky, Dubrova and Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast, as well as Torsky, Serebryanka, Verkhnekamiansk, Spern and Rozdalivka in Donetsk Oblast were subjected to artillery shelling. On the Bakhmut front, the Russians launched airstrikes in the areas of Bodanivka, Bilahora and Pivnikny, Donetsk Oblast. Areas of the settlements of Ry Oleksandrivka, Bashukivka, Orikovo Vasilivka, Novomarkov, Chasev Yar, Ivanovsky, Ozaryanivka, Pivden and New York in Donetsk Oblast suffered from artillery shelling. On the Avdiivka front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in the area of Severny and Avdiivka. The Russians inflicted airstrikes in the areas of Avdiivka and Nevelsky. Artillery shelling was also recorded in the settlements of Lastochkin, Avdiivka, Karlivka, Pervomaisk and Nevelsky in Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, the Russians carried out offensive operations in the area around Marinka and Pobeda, Donetsk Oblast, but to no avail. They also conducted an airstrike in the area of Krasnohorivka in Donetsk Oblast. At the same time, artillery shelling was carried out in the area of the settlements of Maximilianivka, Marinka, Piorhivka Top Pobeda, Donetsk Oblast. On the Shakhtarsk front, the Russians launched airstrikes near Zolotaniva, Glika Novosilka and Blahodatna. They fired at the settlements of Pereskoviivka, Novomikhailivka and Blahodatna, Donetsk Oblast. On the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts, the Russians continue to conduct defensive actions, focusing their main efforts on preventing the advance of Ukrainian troops. They tried to restore the lost position in the area of Makarivka in Donetsk Oblast. In addition, invading forces inflicted airstrikes in the areas of Storozhev and Makarivka. Artillery shelling was recorded in the settlements of Novucheretuvate, Makarivka, Storozhev, Zelin Pol and Temirivka in Donetsk Oblast, Lavadna, Chervon, Huliaipol, Charivny, Novoandriivka, Stepovan Piati Kotki in Zaporizhia Oblast, Zolota Balka, Mikhailivka, Dudchiny, Ivanivka, Sadov, Molodizhny, Bilozerka, Antonivka, Kherson and Dniprovsky in Kherson Oblast. The General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces reported on June 22 that Russia has lost 222,650 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of its full-scale invasion, with an estimated 650 casualties on June 21. AFU advancing in 3 sectors, enemy using reserves and suffering heavy losses, General Staff. The armed forces of Ukraine continue to conduct offensive operations in the Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Lyman directions. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported this on Facebook, according to Ukrinform. The Defense Forces of Ukraine continue to conduct offensive operations in 3 directions: Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Lyman. In the Rivnopil-Staromayorsk direction, we had partial success. We're gaining a foothold on the achieved lines, inflicting artillery fire on identified enemy targets, and conducting measures of a counter-battery fight, the report says. The enemy is using reserves, trying to regain the lost positions. At the same time, the Russian forces are suffering great losses. In the Lyman direction, the Defense Forces of Ukraine conducted offensive operations in the area of Bilohorivka-Dubrova, had partial success, and are consolidating at the achieved boundaries, the General Staff noted. As reported by Ukrinform, the Ukrainian Air Force launched 12 strikes targeting Russian manpower clusters, as well as 6 anti-aircraft missile systems over the past day. General Staff reports new positions gained on southern front line. Ukrainian forces achieved partial success in at least 2 directions on the southern front and made new gains, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said on June 22. The military continues to conduct offensive operations in 3 main directions: Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Lyman, the General Staff informed. Russian forces are reportedly deploying reserves to recover lost positions but are suffering heavy losses, the brief added. According to its report, Ukrainian forces advanced in the Rivnopil-Staromayorsk direction, in the west of Donetsk Oblast, and in the Bilohorivka-Dubrova direction, on the border between Luhansk and Kharkiv oblasts, solidifying newly taken positions. President Volodymyr Zelensky acknowledged on June 21 that battlefield progress has been slower than desired, due to increased Russian defenses on the front lines, particularly in western Zaporizhia Oblast and throughout southern Ukraine. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar emphasized on June 20 that it is not useful to gauge the success of military actions based solely by kilometers or the number of liberated settlements, underscoring that the pace of Ukraine's operations right now is not indicative of future successes.